It was just another Thursday evening at Victory Martial Arts Academy. The advanced class had gone a bit late, and the gym smelled like sweat, ambition, and disinfectant. In the far corner, quietly mopping the floor, was Elijah Brooks, the new janitor. He wore a faded grey hoodie, old sneakers, and moved with the quiet efficiency of someone used to being invisible. That's when it happened. From the center of the mat, Logan Cooper, the young and cocky assistant instructor, clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "Hey, you there, janitor, how about you stop mopping for a second and show us some moves?" Everyone laughed. At first, Elijah didn't respond. He just kept scrubbing a stubborn stain near the edge of the mat, his head slightly bowed. "I'm serious, man," Logan pushed, flashing his perfect teeth like he was on a stage. "Come on, impress us. Or, wait, have you ever even seen a real fight up close?" More laughter. A few students looked away, uncomfortable. Maya, a purple belt with a sharp eye, frowned. She didn't like the tone Logan was using. Elijah finally stood up slowly and wiped his hands on the side of his sweatpants. He looked at Logan, not angry, not nervous, just calm. "I'm just finishing up here," Elijah said, his voice quiet and steady. "Didn't mean to interrupt your class." But Logan wasn't letting it go. "Oh no, you're not interrupting anything. This is perfect." He grinned. "Guys, how about we do a live demo? Let's show what happens when a guy who trains every day meets a guy who just mops floors." The students chuckled again, but the laughter was thinner now. Elijah gave a polite smile and nodded, stepping back toward his mop. That's when Logan said it. "Come on, man, don't be scared. I bet your mop knows more about balance than you do." Silence. The gym froze. Elijah slowly looked up. He took a breath. A long, slow breath like a wave pulling back before the crash. Maya glanced around. Something didn't feel right. "Please," Elijah said, still calm, "just let me do my job." But Logan stepped off the mat, walking straight toward him. "Nah, man, we all need a little entertainment now and then." He grabbed Elijah's mop and leaned it against the wall. "You've been working here, what, 2 weeks?" Logan asked, still grinning. "Let's give the students a show." Elijah didn't speak. He just stood there, looking at the mat. Then, quietly, he said, "You don't want this." Logan laughed so loud it echoed. "Hear that, guys? The janitor says I don't want this." The students laughed again, though fewer this time. But what none of them knew, what Logan couldn't possibly imagine, was that Elijah Brooks was no ordinary janitor. And what was about to happen would silence the room, shake the foundation of the gym, and leave Logan Cooper begging for more than just respect. It would leave him begging for forgiveness. For a moment, Logan stood there smirking, arms crossed, clearly enjoying the spotlight. His students were still in their GIs, sitting along the edge of the mat, waiting for a show. But Elijah wasn't performing. He just looked down at the mat, hands in his pockets, his shoulders relaxed, too relaxed for someone who was supposedly nervous inside, though his mind was running. 17 years. That's how long it had been since he stepped on a mat like this one, since he walked away from everything he used to be, since Elijah the Silent Lion Brooks, once a feared and respected mama champion, vanished from the world of fighting without warning. Most people thought he had gotten injured. Some assumed he had retired rich. A few whispered about a scandal, but no one knew the truth, and Elijah never corrected them. He'd disappeared, traded the spotlight for silence, fame for simplicity. For years, he worked as a security guard, a delivery driver, a night cleaner, always jobs where no one would ask questions, where no one would recognize him, where he could fade into the background. Until now. Elijah glanced at Logan, who was bouncing on his heels like a teenager waiting for a prize fight. He has no idea what he's doing. Logan had talent, sure. He was fast, sharp, and trained. But Elijah could already see the arrogance in his stance. The way he left his right side open just slightly when shifting weight, the tension in his jaw that always preceded a swing. More importantly, Logan had never known loss, never held a friend's body in his arms on a cold mat, whispering "I'm sorry" to a man who wouldn't open his eyes again. Elijah's jaw tightened slightly at the memory. The face of Carlos Mendez, his best friend and sparring partner, flashed in his mind. That night, that one mistake, a training session that turned deadly, one punch too hard, one fall at the wrong angle. An accident, they said, but Elijah knew better. He carried that weight every single day, and it was that moment that made him walk away forever. Until now. "I'm not here to fight," Elijah said again. His voice still calm, but it had an edge, now a quiet warning. Logan ignored it. "Let's go, man. A few moves, that's all. Show us your best janitor kung fu," he mocked, and a few students chuckled nervously. Elijah took a deep breath and stepped forward, not toward Logan, but toward the center of the mat. His steps were smooth, almost too smooth. Anyone paying attention might have noticed how his body moved like a current fluid, controlled, precise. He turned around and looked at Logan. "One round," he said. "No punches to the head, no kicks to the knees. You throw first." Logan blinked. The confidence faltered just for a second. Then he laughed. "Fine by me," he said, adjusting his black belt like he was stepping into a title match. "Try not to break a sweat, old man." Maya leaned closer to one of the other students and whispered, "Is it just me, or is this starting to feel wrong?" The student nodded slowly. "It's not just you." The gym went silent. Everyone's eyes were on the mat. What none of them realized, what too arrogant to notice, was that they weren't about to watch a janitor get embarrassed. They were about to witness the return of a legend, and the legend was no longer holding back. The mat felt different under Elijah's feet, not because it was new, but because it had been years since he last stepped into a ring. Years since the smell of sweat, the tension in the air, and the focus of 100 eyes reminded him of who he used to be. But tonight wasn't about remembering. It was about respect. Logan cracked his neck dramatically, bouncing side to side, hyping himself up in front of his students like he was on national television. "You ready, Mr. Mop?" he smirked. Elijah didn't respond. He simply raised his hands, not in an aggressive stance, but with quiet composure, his fingers slightly curved, elbows relaxed, eyes locked onto Logan's chest, not his face, not his fists, his center. It was the kind of focus that came from hundreds of real fights, not tournaments, not school sparring. Real fights with real consequences. Logan didn't recognize it. He charged in with a quick jab, textbook, sharp, fast, aiming for the shoulder, a move that usually caught slower opponents off guard. But Elijah wasn't slow. He didn't even move back. Instead, he rotated his hips just enough for the punch to miss him by inches, his feet pivoting softly across the mat. The gym fell into stunned silence. No reaction, no counterattack, just a clean, quiet dodge. Logan blinked. He stepped back, bounced again, then lunged in with a combo right jab, left hook, spin kick, fast, fluid, flashy, and none of it connected. Elijah dodged each strike with almost lazy precision, moving like he knew the attacks before they happened. A small gasp came from the corner. Maya, she had seen it too. Not just the dodges, but the way Elijah's feet slid across the mat, measured, perfectly timed, like a dancer who'd rehearsed every step 1,000 times. Logan grunted, frustrated now. "Fight me," he snapped. Elijah finally spoke. "I am." Logan growled and rushed forward, aiming a powerful right cross toward Elijah's ribs. That's when it happened. A movement so subtle most people missed it. Elijah turned slightly, guided Logan's wrist with his left hand and used his right palm to tap Logan's chest. Just a tap, but Logan's feet left the floor. He flew backward and landed flat on his back with a thud that echoed across the room. Gasps. One student even stood up, mouth wide open. Logan lay there stunned, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what just happened. Elijah stood still, breathing evenly. "You overextended," he said calmly. "You lead with your shoulder before every punch. It gives you away." The silence was deafening. No one laughed. No one spoke. Even Logan, still on the floor, couldn't find the words. Maya slowly stepped forward, breaking the silence. "Who are you?" Elijah glanced at her, then at the others watching in disbelief. "I'm just the janitor," he said with a faint smile, "but that doesn't mean I don't know how to clean up a mess." He turned to walk away, heading toward the corner where his mop still stood quietly against the wall. But it was far from over. Logan wasn't done, and the lesson hadn't even begun. Logan lay on the mat, chest heaving, face red, not just from the impact, but from the humiliation. The room was dead silent. Some students looked shocked, others looked disappointed. Elijah, already walking back toward his mop, didn't turn round. He had made his point. That should have been enough. But pride doesn't give up that easily, especially when it's bruised in front of an audience. With a grunt, Logan rolled onto his side and forced himself up. "You caught me off guard," he muttered, brushing off his GI like it was the mat's fault he ended up there. Elijah didn't respond. He was back at the edge of the mat, reaching for the mop handle. "You're not walking away," Logan snapped. "Not after that." His voice cracked slightly, but his ego pushed through it. "Let's go again. This time, for real." Elijah turned slowly, lifting an eyebrow. "That wasn't real enough. For you, you got lucky. No such thing." Logan squared up again, ignoring the nervous looks from a few students. "Don't embarrass yourself twice," Elijah said gently. "Let it go, son." That son hit deeper than any punch. Logan charged, but this time, it wasn't controlled. It was angry, messy, personal. He swung wildly, ignoring technique, just trying to hit something. Elijah moved like water. He ducked under the first punch, stepped to the side, and tapped Logan's leg with his foot just enough to shift his balance. Logan stumbled forward and nearly tripped over his own momentum. Gasps again. Someone whispered, "Is this guy even real?" Logan spun around, now panting. "Stop dodging and fight." "Me, this is fighting," Elijah replied calmly. "You just don't recognize it because it's not full of noise and ego." Another rush, another dodge. This time, Elijah didn't even touch him. He just wasn't there when Logan's kick came through. Logan stumbled again, his face now dripping sweat, not from exhaustion, but from panic. His usual control was gone. His sharp movements were failing him. Everything he thought made him a fighter was being dismantled by a man who hadn't even raised a fist. The students were no longer entertained. They were learning, and that stung more than the fall. Maya stepped forward again, voice steady. "Logan, maybe you should stop." He shot her a look. "I've got this." But he didn't. Elijah finally walked back onto the mat, slow, measured. He didn't raise his fists. He didn't change his stance. He just stood there and spoke. "Fighting isn't about proving you're better," he said, eyes locked on Logan. "It's about control. It's about protecting others even from themselves. You want to be a sensei, then start acting like one." Logan froze. The words landed harder than any strike. And for between fists, it was between a man's pride and the truth, staring him in the face, and Logan was losing. For the first time all night, Logan didn't move. He stood there, fists clenched, chest rising and falling rapidly, but not from effort, from something deeper, something raw, doubt. The students didn't speak. Some had their hands resting on their knees, frozen. Maya's eyes were glued to Elijah, her mind racing with questions. Who was this man? Why did his every movement feel like it carried a lifetime of training, and loss? Elijah exhaled slowly, his gaze dropping to the mat beneath his feet. For a second, just a second, he wasn't in that gym anymore. He was back in Los Angeles, in a different ring, under different lights. 20 years ago, the roar of the crowd, the heat of adrenaline, and the flashing cameras. His opponent, his best friend, Carlos Mendez. They'd trained together since they were teens, slept on gym mats, ate cold noodles for dinner between tournaments, promised they'd retire together someday and open a school of their own. Carlos was the only person who ever truly challenged Elijah, not just physically, but spiritually. He kept Elijah grounded, balanced, until that night. It was supposed to be a friendly exhibition, a charity event. No pressure, but the crowd. They didn't care. They wanted blood. They wanted drama. They jeered and mocked, especially at a black fighter from the Bronx. He heard the slurs, the threats, the laughter. He let the rage in. He fought like he had something to prove. One wrong hit, Carlos slipped. The thud of his head hitting the canvas still echoed in Elijah's nightmares. Carlos never woke up. The investigation called it a tragic accident. Elijah called it his greatest failure. He quit the ring the next day. No press conference, no farewell tour. He vanished. And the man who once stood on championship podiums became a janitor by choice. Not because he lacked talent, but because he no longer trusted himself with power. Back in the gym, Logan took a step forward, snapping Elijah back to the present. "I'm not done," Logan muttered, trying to summon what little pride he had. "Left you are," Elijah said simply. "But you just don't know it yet." Maya stepped between them unexpectedly. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered with intensity. "Sensei Logan," she said firmly, "we came here to learn martial arts, not to watch someone chase ghosts." Elijah looked at her, surprised, but also grateful. Logan's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He glanced at his students, and what he saw hit him harder than any punch could. They weren't looking at him like a leader anymore. They were looking at Elijah, some with awe, some with respect, and some with shame for ever having laughed at him earlier. Logan's shoulders dropped. He backed away, silent, and returned to the edge of the mat. Elijah turned to Maya and nodded. Once, she nodded back. In that moment, no one knew Elijah's full story. But they all knew one thing. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a man who had carried more weight than any of them could imagine. And tonight, he had chosen to stop running. Elijah stepped off the mat and leaned against the wall, silently picking up the mop that had been left there like nothing had happened, but everything had changed. The gym wasn't the same. The air was heavy not with shame, but with reflection. The students sat quietly, processing what they'd witnessed. Not a fight, not a performance, a lesson. Logan, still breathing hard, paced at the far end of the mat. His fists were unclenched now, but his pride still burned beneath the surface. He stole glances at Elijah, confused, humiliated, but more than anything, curious. Maya approached. Elijah, her voice soft. "That, what you did, was incredible." Elijah gave a small smile. "It was necessary." She hesitated. "Who are you, really?" He didn't answer at first. Instead, he set the mop aside, walked back to the center of the mat, and looked at the students. "You all came here to learn how to fight," he said calmly, his voice carrying across the silent gym. "But what's the point of fighting if you don't know why you're doing it?" The students looked at each other. Logan folded his arms, but didn't speak. "Martial arts," Elijah continued, "isn't about beating someone. It's about knowing when not to." He looked directly at Logan, no, not with contempt, but with clarity. "I've been where you are," he said. Cocky, hungry, needing to prove something to the world. He paused, his eyes darkening. "For a brief second, I had to bury my best friend because I let that hunger take control." The room froze. No one had expected that. Logan's arms dropped to his sides. Maya's expression changed, softened into something like sorrow. Elijah took a breath. "Since that day, I promised I'd never use my skills to humiliate anyone. But tonight," he looked around the room. "Tonight, I saw that someone needed to be reminded what respect really means." The students nodded slowly. One by one, their expressions shifted from amusement to discomfort to reverence. Logan took a slow step forward. "I didn't know," he said quietly. Elijah tilted his head. "If you had known, would you have treated me differently?" Logan hesitated. "That's the real question," Elijah said. "Because the truth is, there are people around you every day who carry stories you'll never hear, pain you'll never see, and strength you'll never understand until it's too late." He looked around the room. "I don't want your admiration," he said simply. "I just want you to remember, power without humility is just violence waiting for an audience." Silence then. Applause, not loud, not forced, just honest, slow clapping. Maya started it. A few students joined in, even the ones who had laughed earlier. Logan didn't clap, but he didn't walk away either. He stood there watching Elijah as if seeing him for the first time, not as a janitor, or even as a teacher, a real one. And deep down, something in him cracked, just enough to let a little humility in. Later that night, the students had all gone home. The lights were dimmed. The only sound left in the gym was the soft swish of Elijah's mop sliding across the far corner of the mat. Despite everything, he stayed behind to finish the job, because that's who he was. Not just a fighter, not just a teacher, a man who never saw himself above any work. Logan hadn't left either. He was sitting alone on the bench near the lockers, his GI still on, sweat drying against his back, pride still raw. He had watched the students leave one by one, some nodding politely at him, others avoiding eye contact. For the first time, he felt like a stranger in his own dojo. Elijah didn't acknowledge Logan at first. He just kept cleaning, until Logan stood up and walked across the mat again. No anger this time, no sarcasm, just a silence that stretched until he finally spoke. "Carlos Mendes," Logan said quietly. "That's the name you mentioned earlier, right?" Elijah stopped mopping. He turned, surprised. "Do you remember that? I looked him up on my phone just now." Logan held up the screen. "You weren't lying. You really were a world champion." Elijah gave a half smile. "I never lied. I just didn't advertise." Logan nodded slowly. "The articles said you were the best, the silent lion. I remember hearing that name once when I was a kid. I thought it was just a nickname." "It was more than that," Elijah replied. walking over to the bench. It was a version of me I buried a long time ago. Logan sat down again. Why come back now? Elijah leaned against the wall, folding his arms. I didn't plan to, he said, but sometimes the world brings you face to face with the very thing you've been running from. Logan looked down at his hands. I thought I was the best in this gym. You probably are, Elijah said sincerely. But being the best doesn't always make you a leader. Logan flinched, but he didn't argue. I know I was out of line, he said. What I did, how I spoke to you, it wasn't right, and I think I did it because I needed someone to make me feel important. Elijah nodded. We all need to feel seen, but not at the expense of someone else's dignity. Logan took a long breath, his voice softer than it had been all night. Would you consider training me? Elijah raised an eyebrow. Logan shrugged. Not just in fighting, in what you know, in what you've learned. Elijah didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked over, picked up a practice pad from the shelf, and tossed it gently at Logan's chest. Logan caught it, confused. Meet me here Saturday, Elijah said. 6 a.m. You show up on time, with humility, and ready to learn. Then we'll see. Logan cracked a tiny smile. You serious? I'm always serious before sunrise. They both chuckled. For the first time, the tension between them began to dissolve. Logan stood, bowed respectfully, then turned to leave. As he walked out the gym door, he glanced back one last time. Elijah was still there, back to mopping. But Logan knew that wasn't a janitor anymore. That was a lion, quietly watching the jungle he had once ruled. Saturday morning came early. The sun hadn't even broken over the rooftops yet, but the lights inside Victory Martial Arts Academy were already on. Elijah was there exactly at 5:45 a.m., wearing simple black sweatpants, a plain gray hoodie, and that same calm expression he always wore. He had already swept the mat. The air was fresh. The silence in the building reminded him of early tournament mornings before the crowd, before the chaos. It was peaceful. At exactly 6 a.m., the front door creaked open. Logan stepped inside, out of breath, clearly having sprinted the last block. I'm not late, he gasped, checking his watch. Right on time, Elijah replied, tossing him a towel. Let's begin. For the next 2 hours, there were no dramatic fights, no fancy kicks, no takedowns. Elijah started with the basics: footwork, balance, breathing. Logan followed, confused at first. He expected something more, intense. But as the minutes passed, he began to understand. Every movement Elijah made had purpose. Every step, every pause, every shift of weight was precise. This wasn't just physical training, it was mental discipline. It was about control, stillness, clarity. You've got power, Elijah said, walking a slow circle around Logan. But power without structure, that's just chaos. Logan nodded, sweat dripping from his forehead. Breathe slower, Elijah added. Let your body lead. Stop fighting yourself. It was the hardest lesson Logan had ever faced, because it wasn't about punching harder. It was about retraining his instincts. At one point, Logan stumbled during a slow pivot. Frustrated, he punched the air and cursed under his breath. Elijah stopped him. Don't do that, he said, firmly. Logan looked up. What? I messed up. Yes, Elijah replied, and you'll mess up again. But every time you do, you have a choice. You can get angry, or you can listen to what the mistake is trying to teach you. Logan lowered his eyes, nodding. I've never trained like this before. Elijah smiled. That's because you've been training to win, not to grow. By 8 a.m., Logan was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. He sat on the bench, towel draped over his shoulders, eyes wide open, not in shock, but in awakening. Elijah sat beside him, opening 2 water bottles and handing him one. So, Elijah asked casually, still want to be the best? Logan took a sip, thinking carefully before answering. No, he said, I want to be better. Elijah nodded, satisfied. Good, because that's where the real training starts. They sat in silence for a moment. 2 fighters, 2 generations, 2 stories colliding on the same mat. But something had shifted. Elijah wasn't just training Logan in martial arts, only earned through pain, loss, and redemption. And Logan, for the first time, was ready to receive it. Weeks passed. Every Saturday at dawn and, eventually Wednesdays too, Logan showed up. No one forced him. No one watched. There were no cameras, no audience, no trophies waiting, only discipline. And Elijah, the man once called the silent lion, never raised his voice, never bragged, never punished, but his presence alone demanded respect. His teaching came in quiet corrections, small observations, moments of silence that made Logan think deeper than any lecture could. Logan started to change, not just in how he moved on the mat but how he walked through life. He listened more, he spoke less, he began to bow more genuinely before each session. He greeted the janitors and front desk staff by name. He started staying after class to clean the mats without being asked. The students noticed, so did the owner of the academy. And one Friday afternoon, the gym owner called Elijah into the office. "I've heard some things," he said, folding his hands on the desk, "about you, about what happened here a few weeks ago." Elijah didn't deny anything, he just waited. The owner leaned back, nodding. "I saw the security footage, the way you moved, the way you handled it. There wasn't just defense, that was mastery. I did what needed to be done," Elijah said simply. "Well," the owner smiled, "how would you feel about doing it more officially?" Elijah frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I want to offer you a position. Instructor, not just cleaning floors, but cleaning egos, teaching advanced technique, teaching character. We need more of that around here." Elijah sat back, surprised. For years, he had avoided this, rejected every invitation to return, every offer to coach, every whisper of comeback. But this felt different. This wasn't about glory. This was about healing, and maybe passing the torch. "I'll think about it," he said. But deep down he already knew the answer. The next morning, Elijah arrived even earlier than usual. He unlocked the door himself, put on a fresh jean, and waited on the mat. At 5:58, Logan walked in. He froze when he saw Elijah dressed, not as a janitor, but as a master. He bowed deeply, without hesitation. Elijah nodded. "No training today," he said. Logan looked confused. "Why not?" Elijah smiled faintly. "Because today, you're going to help me teach." Logan's eyes widened. "You've earned it. But more importantly," Elijah continued, "you're ready to show others what you learned." Students slowly began arriving for the regular class. They entered to find Logan standing beside Elijah across from him. Some blinked in surprise. Others smiled knowingly. Elijah clapped his hands once. "Line up," he said. "Today, we start over." He glanced at Logan. "And this time, we build on something real." That morning, no one asked about titles. No one cared about belts. Because what mattered now wasn't status, it was character. And under Elijah's guidance, a new kind of strength was being born on that mat. One built not on dominance but on humility, discipline, and the courage to face the truth about yourself. 3 months later, Victory Martial Arts Academy looked the same from the outside, but inside, everything had changed. The students trained harder, but with more respect. There was less shouting, and more listening. Fewer egos, and more humility. And at the center of that quiet transformation was Elijah Brooks. No longer just a janitor, no longer just a legend who disappeared. He was now simply Sensei Elijah. The name was spoken with a mixture of admiration and curiosity, especially by the younger students who never knew about his past in the ring. And Elijah preferred it that way. He didn't put up posters of his old fights. He never mentioned his titles. He didn't need to, because now his victories weren't measured in belts or trophies but in the way his students walked out of the gym, taller, calmer, and more centered. Logan had changed too. He still taught beginner classes, but now with a different tone. He watched his students closely, not to impress, but to guide. He corrected with patience. He encouraged more than he commanded. And every week, before the first class began, Logan would sweep the mat himself, not because he had to, but because he wanted to remember where he started. One afternoon, Maya approached Elijah during a break. "I still think about that night," she said. "The way you moved, it didn't look human." Elijah chuckled. "It wasn't about power, it was about control." She nodded. "But more than that, it was about restraint." He looked at her with a calm smile. "Exactly." Then she asked something she had been holding in for months. "Why did you come here, Elijah? I mean, why this gym? Out of all the places." He took a deep breath, eyes drifting toward the sunlight pouring through the tall windows. "I wasn't looking for a fight," he said. "I was looking for peace." "And did you find it?" Elijah looked round at the students, bowing, laughing, helping one another. At Logan mentoring a younger student with a smile. At Maya, standing there with eyes full of purpose. "Yes," he said, "and I think it's spreading." That evening, after the last class ended, Elijah stayed behind, like he always did. He walked the empty gym with the same mop he once pushed as a stranger. But now, it wasn't a symbol of silence. It was a reminder that true strength doesn't shout. It listens, it lifts others, it forgives, it teaches. As he turned off the lights, Elijah glanced one last time at the words now painted in bold letters on the far wall. Something Logan had written weeks earlier, after a quiet nod from Elijah. "Power means nothing without humility." And with that, the silent lion stepped out into the night, not to hide, but to keep walking forward, this time, not alone. And never again insolence.